When you really sit back and look at what happened in this playoff loss, the story starts with exactly what Brock Purdy said himself, and that's why I want to begin here. This wasn't about effort, and it wasn't about being overwhelmed by the moment. It came down to execution in the most unforgiving areas of playoff football. Third downs, fourth and short situations, red zone opportunities that ended in field goals instead of touchdowns. Against a team like Seattle, those margins don't just matter, they decide the game. Brock made it clear that spotting a defense good field position by turning the ball over on downs is a recipe for disaster, and that theme kept repeating itself throughout the night. What stood out to me is how direct Brock was about it. There were no excuses. He acknowledged that Seattle is a good defense, but he also pointed out that the 49ers had opportunities to stay on the field and didn't capitalize. When you fail to convert on third down, you don't just stall drives, you hand momentum to the other sideline. And once that snowball starts rolling, especially in the playoffs, it's incredibly hard to stop. If you're watching this right now and you felt that frustration building drive after drive, you weren't imagining it. That was the game slipping away in real time. Brock also touched on something that matters more than people realize: rhythm. This offense is at its best when timing is sharp and plays unfold as designed. Instead, the pressure forced him into more off-schedule moments, scrambling and trying to create rather than operating within structure. Seattle's defensive approach was deliberate. They wanted short throws, they wanted patience, and they trusted their pass rush to eventually force mistakes. That's not flashy defense, but it's smart defense, and it worked. One of the most honest moments came when Brock addressed the interception. He didn't point fingers. He didn't deflect. He flat out said he shouldn't have thrown the ball and should have lived to see another down. That's quarterback growth right there. In the postseason, every decision is magnified, and that one mistake weighed heavy, especially because it came when the offense was already off schedule. Let me ask you this, and I really want you to answer honestly in the comments. Do you think this loss was more about the 49ers beating themselves or Seattle forcing them into mistakes? Simple yes or no works too. And if you appreciate this kind of straight, no spin breakdown, make sure you subscribe and help this channel push toward 1,000 subscribers. We cover this team honestly, especially when it hurts. Because as frustrating as the execution was, what happened after the game might matter even more. Inside that locker room, the emotions, the message from Kyle Shanahan, and the pride this team still carries tell a much bigger story about where this group is headed next. And that's where we're going next. What made this loss hit harder wasn't just the scoreboard or the final whistle. It was everything that came after. Brock Purdy gave us a real window into what that locker room felt like once the season officially ended, and it was exactly what you'd expect from a team that believed it could go all the way. The goal was never just to make the playoffs or even get this far. The goal was to win and keep playing. When that gets taken away from you, especially in a moment like this, there's nothing that makes it feel better right away. Brock talked about how fresh the loss still was, and you could feel that. At the same time, he mentioned Kyle Shanahan addressing the team and reminding them what this season actually represented. That's not an easy message to hear when emotions are raw, but it matters. This was a year where the 49ers were constantly backed into a corner. Guys went down, roles changed, young players were thrown into situations they probably weren't supposed to be in yet. And still, this team kept finding ways to survive and advance. What really stood out was how often Brock brought up the heart of this locker room. He mentioned Kyle. He mentioned Trent Williams. He mentioned that everyone felt it. That's not coach speak. That's a quarterback telling you this group is different. The resiliency, the character, and the willingness of guys to step up wasn't something he had experienced before, and that says a lot considering where he's been in a short amount of time. There's also something important about acknowledging pride without letting it turn into comfort. Brock made it clear that, yes, reflecting on the season does bring some good feelings, but that doesn't erase the pain. That balance is critical. Great teams don't move on from losses quickly, but they also don't let them define who they are. Right now, it hurts. That's natural. But underneath that disappointment is a belief that this wasn't the end of something special. It was part of the process. I want to know where you're at as a fan right now. Are you able to feel proud of this team despite how it ended, or does the loss still overshadow everything else? Drop your answer in the comments because every fan processes this differently. And if you're still here listening through the tough part, do me a favor and like the video. It really helps this channel grow, and it tells me you want more in-depth coverage like this as we move forward. Because the next step in understanding this loss is figuring out why Seattle keeps making life so difficult for this offense. This wasn't a one-time issue, and Brock was very clear about what has to change if the 49ers want a different result next time. That's where we're headed next. At some point, you have to stop looking at this as just one bad night and start asking the harder question, and Brock Purdy actually answered it for us. Why does Seattle keep slowing this offense down? Why does a unit that can light up almost anyone else struggle to put points on the board against this defense? According to Brock, it comes down to discipline, patience, and execution over an entire game, not just a few drives. Seattle isn't trying to outscore you with splash plays on defense. They're trying to frustrate you. They sit in soft zone, take away the deep shots, and force you to go short again and again, 6 yards here, 7 yards there, and they trust that eventually something breaks down. A missed block, a rushed throw, a failed third down. That style demands that you stay on, schedule, convert when it matters, and accept that it might not look pretty. When you don't, the defense wins. Brock admitted that against this type of defense, third downs become everything. You have to stay on the field. You have to keep drives alive. And when the 49ers failed to do that, Seattle controlled the game without ever needing to dominate it. That's the part that makes this matchup so frustrating. It's not about talent gaps. It's about precision. And in this game, the margin for error was razor thin. The pressure up front played a huge role, too. Seattle's defensive line didn't need to be perfect on every snap because someone was always capable of winning. If one rusher didn't get there, another did. That constant pressure speeds up decisions and pushes the offense off rhythm. You could see it in how often Brock had to move, scramble, or abandon the structure of the play. That's not how this offense wants to live. What's important here is that Brock didn't frame this as an unsolvable problem. He framed it as a lesson. When you play smart, patient football and execute on third down, you can beat this defense. The 49ers have done it before. They just didn't do it when it mattered most this time. So let me throw this question to you. Do you think the 49ers need to change their offensive approach when they face Seattle next season, or is it simply about executing better within the same system? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still riding with this team and want coverage that doesn't sugarcoat things, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one counts. Because as frustrating as this matchup has been, what comes next is why this loss doesn't feel like the end. Brock Purdy didn't hesitate when he was asked about the future, and his confidence says a lot about where this team believes it's headed. When Brock Purdy was asked if this team can win a Super Bowl next season, there was no pause and no hesitation. His answer was simple and direct, 100%. And that confidence didn't come from blind optimism or ignoring how this season ended. It came from everything this team went through and still managed to overcome. Brock talked about health being a major factor, and that matters. This roster spent most of the season fighting through injuries, shuffling pieces, and asking guys to step into bigger roles than expected. Despite that, they kept finding ways to compete. From his eye perspective, that's proof the foundation is strong. When this group gets healthier, learns from what went wrong, and builds off the adversity, he believes the ceiling is still a championship. What also stood out was how unwilling Brock was to lean on excuses. When asked about the lack of fully healthy receivers at different points, he shut that down immediately. He praised the guys who stepped up, talked about young players being thrown into the fire, and made it clear that everyone in that locker room believes in the talent on this roster. That kind of mindset matters. Leaders don't look backward for reasons. They look forward for solutions. There was also an important update on Brock himself. He said he feels good physically and isn't limited in how he moves or plays. That's huge for this offense. His ability to extend plays, scramble, and create outside structure is a big part of what makes this unit dangerous. Knowing he feels confident heading into the offseason changes the outlook entirely. This wasn't a quarterback making promises. This was a quarterback laying out why he believes. The adversity this team faced all season didn't break them. If anything, it sharpened them. And when you combine experience, health, and a locker room that genuinely believes in itself, you get a team that expects to be back in this position again. So I want to hear from you. Do you believe Brock Purdy can lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl, or do you still need to see more? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in the direction of this team, make sure you like the video and subscribe to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. We're going to be here all off-season breaking down what comes next. Because if Brock's confidence sets the tone for the future, Christian McCaffrey's words remind you just how much this season demanded physically and emotionally, and his perspective might be the most powerful of all. Christian McCaffrey's words carried a different kind of weight, and you could hear it in his voice. This wasn't just disappointment about a loss. This was the emotional release of a season that demanded everything he had, physically and mentally. He described it as one of the hardest years of his life, and when you listen closely, you understand why. From the moment the calendar turned, he was rehabbing, grinding, and pushing himself with almost no downtime, all just to be ready when this team needed him. What makes his reflection so powerful is that even in the middle of the pain, his focus stayed on the people around him. He talked about how proud he was to be part of this team, how much he loves that locker room, and how grateful he is for the people who believed in him when things were uncertain. That's leadership, not just carrying the workload on Sundays, but setting the emotional standard when the season ends in heartbreak. Christian also touched on how hard it is to process everything right away. When you've been battling week after week, especially through short weeks and constant physical challenges, your body and mind don't immediately switch off. The loss stings, and it takes time before perspective kicks in. But even through that, he made it clear how much this group means to him and how special this season was, despite how it ended. Another important piece of his message was about the young players. He expressed pride in guys who weren't expected to start early but were forced into action and grew because of it. That experience matters. It's how teams build for the future. Those reps, those tough moments, they don't disappear just because the season ends. This is why the word unfinished keeps coming to mind. Not because the loss doesn't hurt, but because the belief hasn't disappeared. Christian didn't talk like someone walking away discouraged. He talked like someone who understands the pain, but also understands the potential of what's ahead. So let me ask you this as we wrap this up. Does this team feel like it has unfinished business to you? And what does Christian McCaffrey represent to this locker room in your eyes? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you stayed with me through this entire breakdown, make sure you like the video and subscribe. We're building this channel together, pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and there's a lot more to come as this team looks ahead to what's next.